Hey book besties, it's Gracie, and today I decided to sit down and film my 6-month recap of the best books I have read in 2024 so far. Between January 1st and June 30th, I have read 68 books in the first 6 months of 2024, so I wanted to go over today my 5-star reads and some honorable 4-star mentions in case you need any more books to add to your TBR. Unfortunately, after this move, I don't really have any physical books with me. They are all in storage, or most of them are in storage at the moment, so I'm just gonna have the book pop up on the screen. We're gonna do a quick little chit chat about it, why it was 5 stars, why I think you should add it to your TBR, and just kind of do like a book check-in for the year. One more thing before we get into it, this video will have 0 spoilers. I'm just gonna be talking about how much I love them, why I rated that way, and why they should be on your TBR list. Nothing really having to do with plots, plot twists, spoilers, nothing like that, so don't you worry. So if y'all are new here, hi, I'm Gracie. I live in Tampa, Florida. I do a little bit of travel, a little bit of lifestyle, a little bit of books, and I would love it if you would subscribe down below and join the fam, stick around and see all the fun. As much as I do not want the month of July to end, I have already read some good books this month. Unfortunately, we are not talking about them, so if you subscribe down below, you'll be here for my July reads video. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump into the recap. I don't have a script or anything, but I will be looking at my phone because I took it straight off my Goodreads. Let me just say, out of the 68 books I read in the first 6 months of this year, 20 of them got 5 stars. That's actually way higher than I thought, but then I had to remind myself my life was changed this year because I read Throne of Glass and ACOTAR. So there's a good chunk of those 20 books that are fantasy, but don't worry, that's not all we're talking about today. I kind of have genres all over the place, but I did think that was pretty crazy. I'm like, usually I'm not a super tough critic, but I'm also not a super easy critic. I feel like I kind of fall right in the middle, but 25 stars, I mean, that's pretty good. And as far as the ranking goes, I don't have rankings any further than 5 stars in the list. In the order that we're going to be talking about is the order in which I read these books, so that's kind of how that was decided. Fun facts to start off, the longest book that I have read so far this year is Kingdom of Ash at 984 pages. Spoiler, it is on the 5-star list. And the shortest book that I have read so far this year, it's actually a novella, and it is the Powerful novella as part of the Powerless series at 192 pages. And before we go into the 5 stars and the honorable 4-star mentions, I'm going to talk about my least favorite book I have read so far this year. Actually, this one I listened to as an audiobook, and that is Pineapple Street by Jenny Jackson. I only have 2 books on the 2-star list this year. No 1-star books so far, thank goodness, also because I've been checking the Goodreads numbers. But xoxo Cody is the other book that got a 2-star, but I feel like it got a 2-star and I kind of knew it going into it that book could have been an email. I won't get into it because y'all know I love Peloton, you know I love Cody, but the book was just unnecessary. I'm in the airport a decent amount, and like the last time I was in the airport, I think I saw like 2 or 3 people reading this book. 2 or 3 people. There was one woman walking out of the bookstore in the airport holding this book. I thought, oh my gosh, put Pineapple Street back. You could do so much better. I just did not like it at all. And while I do understand what the author was getting at with writing that book and all of like the hierarchies and all these things going on with rich people, it actually just kind of made me sick to my stomach. So I feel like anytime I see that book, I'm like, oh, put it away. I personally, and I can only speak from personal experience, did not like the book. It is my lowest rated book of the year. So that was a fun one to throw in there. But now let's get into the 5-star reads. My first 3 5-star reads of the year all happened in the month of January, where I went through a 15-day period of reading the entire ACOTAR series. So I'm just gonna breeze through these really quick. It's A Court of Mist and Fury, A Court of Wings and Ruin, and A Court of Silver Flames. All 3 of these books, part of the ACOTAR series, changed my life. Fourth Wing and Iron Flame introduced me into fantasy last year. Before that, I hadn't really read any fantasy other than maybe if you classify the Hunger Games in there, but like back in middle school. And so I really didn't know what to expect, but I had seen that it was getting such hype. I was like, okay, I really like this. And of course, the next hyped up one was ACOTAR. I had A Court of Thorns and Roses purchased on my Kindle, like I used Kindle credits, bought it last January, so January of 2023, and I started the book on December 30th of 2023, and within 15 days, I read the entire series. I was hooked. I still am hooked. So if you're like me, before I was changed, I was really reading like Lucy Score, Colleen Hoover, like all of these romance books, try and step into fantasy. ACOTAR can seem really overwhelming because it is 5 books in a series, so maybe start with Fourth Wing if that's something you might be into, because that's only 2 books right now. There's a 3rd book coming out later, but at the moment it's only 2 books, and I felt like that was such a great way to get me introduced into all of these things. Or jump right into ACOTAR. Listen, you won't regret it. Like I said, these 3 are 5 stars in my book. You should totally add it. Like, don't be like me and just buy the book and wait and wait and wait. I get it. It's a big time-consuming experience. Obviously 15 days to read the 5 books, a little crazy on my behalf, but I literally would put in my AirPods, I would listen to Dark Academia. Holy cow, I've talked about this before, but in case you haven't seen the videos where I was talking about ACOTAR, I'm not a big like listen to music and read. I thought it was going to be distracting, but I also was on planes and it was football season, so my boyfriend was watching a lot of football and I didn't want to hear that because I was getting distracted by what else I was hearing. Found Dark Academia, started playing it, changed my life when it comes to these fantasy books, so I would recommend trying that too along with it. It can seem like a big undertaking, but all I did was read those books. It may take you more than 15 days, maybe it'll take you less, but for me, I just was consumed. Like every single night I was reading for hours and hours and hours. I'd have dinner and then I would just read for the rest of the night until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. That obsessed. So give it a try, put it on your TBR. Obviously if you've already read it, go to Throne of Glass. If you've already read that, I know I need to get around to Crescent City. I have purchased all of the books on Kindle. A lot of the times I will just download them through the library, but I actually purchased all of these books because I didn't know when I wanted to get around to them, and I still haven't, because that's obviously a big undertaking, and I was trying to like step away from Sarah J Maas just for a second to sort of savor some more of her writing a little later in the year. So anyway, those are the first 3 5-star reads. Okay, in here for February, love Theoretically Ali Hazelwood. This one took me by surprise. I always love Ali Hazelwood books, and I tell everyone this, like I feel just a little bit smarter after reading them, even though they're definitely like heavy romantic books. I just feel smarter because she talks about all kinds of amazing things. Before reading this book, I think it had been a bit since I'd read an Ali Hazelwood book. I don't know what the reasoning was for it, but this was exactly what I needed at the time, and it was so good. There's fake dating, there's relationships. Her men are just so hunky. I just love the way that she writes her fictional characters and her fictional men, and took me exactly where I needed it to at the moment, and I was like, yep, 5 stars. That's exactly what I needed. So sometimes my 5 stars isn't, wow, this was the most like literary book I've ever read. It's definitely a scale of like enjoyment, writing style, how much I wanted to like pick up the book and continually read it. And so this book really just did it for me. I loved it. So after ACOTAR, I knew I needed to start Throne of Glass, but I definitely put some books in between those. But then I started Throne of Glass. It took me 4 books to get into this series. I think I was just still like in an ACOTAR hangover, where just everything about that series was so amazing that when I started to read Throne of Glass, I just like could not get over the last series. But 4 books in, finally struck me, and then I was hooked. I was hooked, and I think 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 all got 5 stars. So what I did with reading Throne of Glass is I would read a Throne of Glass book, sometimes 2 together, and then I would put in some other books. So they're kind of jumbled on this list because I had 2 other 5-star reads in between the 5th ACOTAR book and the 6th. But I'm just gonna tell you right now, Heir of Fire, Queen of Shadows, Empire of Storms, Tower of Dawn, and Kingdom of Ash all got 5 stars. Like I said, the enjoyment scale, I did not want to put it down. Kingdom of Ash, so the last book and my longest book that I've read so far this year, broke me in such a way. This series, oh, like I don't want to spoil anything, so it's really hard to be like, oh my gosh, and this happened and blah blah blah. But just know, I'm sure you hear about these books all over social media. Like truly, 5-star reads, just hooked. Like you are in that world. What I love about these fantasy books is that they just take you out of real life. And what I mean by that is if you pick up a Colleen Hoover or any traditional romance book, let's just say, and it's set in a realistic setting, New York City, and they're going on dates and all this stuff is happening, that could really happen to you, right? So it can be inspiring. You're like, oh, this could be my real life. Sure. When you read these fantasy books, I mean, no way in heck do you have dragons, powers, all these things that sound so silly when you just talk about them to other people, but when you read this book, you are transformed. You are taken into another world, and the real world that you're sitting in while reading this book just ceases to exist, and it's amazing. It takes you away out of any anxiety, any problems that you have, anything that you're doing. Like if you're having a bad day, go read a fantasy book, get out of your life for a little bit while you read the book, and just be totally absorbed into another world. And that's what I love so much about these books, and why these books get an immediate 5-star for me is because I'm like in a whole other realm. Do not touch me, do not talk to me, especially if I'm listening to my Dark Academia music. I do not know where I am. I am in whatever world I'm reading about in the fantasy books. So I just freaking love them. Proud of fantasy, please. Okay. I'm gonna stop now. So within reading the Throne of Glass series, I do have 2 other 5-star reads in here that I believe happened in the month of February. First one is Take My Hand. I came across this book because February is Black History Month and I wanted to be really intentional about reading a book written by a Black author, at least one. So I was on Amazon, I was scrolling through what they had, and I saw this one, Take My Hand, set in the state of Alabama. Immediately clicked with me because I went to the University of Alabama, Roll Tide. I was like, okay, great, let's do it. It looks like it's rated great. This book, like, knife to my heart. It's based on real life events, which to me like makes it so much worse because I'm like, oh my gosh, it just breaks your heart. And it's about this nurse who changes the lives of 2 young girls, and that's all I will really say. But it's set in the state of Alabama, and it's just crazy with the education system and everything that was going on at the time, what was happening in these little girls' lives. And this is one of the books that I feel like I am most grateful to have read. I feel like this book I haven't really heard talked about so much, and I'm like, read Take My Hand, read Take My Hand. And to me, it also wasn't a boring read. It was just, again, took me into that time, and I read this book very quickly because I just couldn't put it down. I think it was like less than 2 days that I had read this book, and I was like, oh my goodness. Recommended it to so many people, and that's all I will have to say about it. But like 5 stars, so impactful. As I was making this list and looking back at my 5-star reads, I was actually shocked that I saw this one as a 5-star read, because in my head, I maybe would now rank it 4 stars, but maybe that's also because I haven't read it since February or really thought about it. But it is another Allie Hazelwood book, and it's called Bride. It was her first paranormal romance. She totally stepped out from writing all of these like STEM, scientific, academic novels to this paranormal romance. I was like, wow, that was really good. And I think at the time I was just so shocked that she had taken basically like a 180 and had done extremely well at it. It was like 5 stars. And I look back, I'm like, oh, I don't really think about it on a daily basis. These 5-star books, like books on this 5-star list, I think about at least once a week. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm still thinking about this book. I'm still thinking. Bride, I haven't really thought about, but again, like I said, really interested. Some of the parts where I was like, oh, okay. Like, I've never really read a vampire book. Don't come for me. I've never read the Twilight series. I was too young at the time. Even when the movies came out, I didn't see the movies until a few years ago, because at the time when the movies were coming out, I was not really old enough to watch them, or at least according to my older sister. She's like, you can't watch these movies. And so I didn't until a few years ago, and I love the movies. So I feel like I'd like the book, but I've never really read about vampires, werewolves. Oh my gosh, I can't say that word. Werewolves. And so this was a first for me, and I really did enjoy it at the time. But again, looking back, I'm like, maybe it'd be a 4-star, but I always go by what I think at the time, and at the time this was a 5-star read to me. So go check out Bride. 2 5-star reads by Kristen Hanna. I'd never picked up a Kristen Hanna book until March, and like, what have I been waiting for? I was always intimidated by the size of her books. Typically I'll go for like a smaller, like a medium-sized book, because I know that that is manageable. You get these huge books. Like, if I were to see Kingdom of Ash a year ago, I'd be like, there's no way I'm reading that. It's way too big. But I flew through it. So same thing with these Kristen Hanna books. They look really big, but I'm telling you, I was like eating it up. There's actually one book in between that got a 5-star in between reading these 2, but I'm just gonna lump these in together as well. The Nightingale, probably her most famous book, if I had to say so myself. Maybe The Great Alone, which I haven't picked up, but I heard is amazing. And The Women. Okay, so Nightingale. I was blown away by Nightingale. I knew I would be, just based on everybody else online. Set in World War II, historical fiction, Nazi-occupied France. Amazing. Great characters, great storyline, sometimes a little confusing, but overall really impacted by the book. So when I saw that she had a new book coming out called The Women, about the women in the Vietnam War, specifically the nurses in the Vietnam War. I had a grandpa who served in the Vietnam War, and so I was like, oh my gosh, I have to pick up this book, because my dad always told me stories about my grandpa who served in the war and then came back from the Vietnam War, and they basically were like, you're not war heroes. You know, there was so much upset in America about it. And also I had visited Vietnam and been to the Vietnam War Museum there. Just all these things that I felt so connected to the women more specifically than I did the Nightingale. This again is a personal experience, but that book I felt like blew the Nightingale out of the water. And maybe that's sort of an unpopular opinion, but holy smokes, I ate up The Women as well. The way that Kristen Hanna writes, you can just feel like horribleness of the war, the camaraderie of the people who are fighting in the war, serving in the war, and then coming home and what they felt like and how their lives were different after serving in the war. It really just brings a different perspective on things, and I just love it. I felt like I got to experience it without actually having to experience it, and that's like obviously in those circumstances for the best. And it really has made me want to read more of her books, but truly she does such a great job at storytelling and allowing you to experience these actual historical events, but from the comfort of your own couch. So good. Shelby Van Pelt, Remarkably Bright Creatures. I have been wanting to read this book for quite a while now, and I just have never gotten around to it because I didn't think it was like that interesting. It's not a romance, it's not a fantasy, it's not like anything crazy. I think maybe technically it's fictional literature. I'm not sure exactly what it's classified under, but it's such a wonderful story about friendship of an older woman and an octopus in an aquarium, and it just really warmed my heart. I was reading this book going, oh my gosh, I have to recommend this to my mom, to my grandma. Everybody needs to read this book. And it was just so sweet and so touching that I felt like it was a breath of fresh air from everything else that I had been reading at the time. And I was like, boom, 5 stars. So good. I know I've been saying so good and whatever, and you have to add it. Like, you really do need to add all these books to your TBR, but I have read more in the past 6 months than I think I have in any other year in my entire life. Actually, I think I can say that for certainty, but it truly has made me appreciate all the different stories that authors are able to find and write and storytell about. And I've just truly been enjoying the words and the imaginations of authors. And Remarkably Bright Creatures is just one of those books where you can really appreciate an author's imagination. The only self-help type book that I have read this year got 5 stars, and it's called The 20-Something Treatment by Dr. Meg Jay. If you are in your 20s, you absolutely have to read her book, The Defining Decade. She actually was a professor on my voyage of semester at sea. I didn't take any psychology classes. I was strictly in business, but I went to a couple of her seminars. I had friends in her class. She really was just a wonderful woman, and she's like, hey, I'm having this new book come out called The 20-Something Treatment. Can I send you a copy? And I was like, sure, thinking like, oh, I'm not really gonna get around to it. And then one day I was like, you know what? I'm gonna pick up the book and I'm gonna read it, and oh my gosh, it's not like a fantasy or romance where you're flying through this book. Truly, there is so much research that I had no idea about how the 20-something brain works. And I feel like when you're in your 20s and life is so uncertain and you have no idea what you want to do with your life, how you're going to do the things you want to do, and you turn to substances, or you turn to other people, or you turn to other methods, it's a great way to rethink about how you are living your life in your 20s. I don't know, very interesting read. I thought it was very insightful and something I don't think I maybe would have picked up right away otherwise, and I'm so glad that I read it, so 5 stars. Back to fantasy just for a bit. Powerless, Lauren Roberts. I have heard about this book for so long, but I was trying to wait until it was closer to the second book, Reckless, coming out. The last thing I want to do is read an excellent book that you know is part of a series and then have to wait so many months for the next one to come out. I started Fourth Wing and I picked it up because I knew Iron Flame had come out, and for whatever reason, I thought it was a duology. I thought there were only going to be 2 books. And at the end of Iron Flame, I go, there's just no way there's not another book coming out. Turns out it's not going to be like a 5-series book, but I finished Iron Flame in like November, beginning of December, and I don't think the next book comes out till the end of January. And I was like, oh, now I'm annoyed. So I didn't want to repeat that same mistake with Powerless, because even though I knew it was so good, I would be kicking myself knowing I had to wait so long for the next book to come out, which now, of course, that I've done Powerless, Powerful, and Reckless, I still gotta wait for the next book coming out next April. Oh my gosh. And I'm so unhappy about it. So I love to read a series that's completed. Anyway, Powerless really just kind of knocked my socks off. Now, I have been on Book Talk and I have seen that there is now drama with the Red Queen and the Powerless and things being the same. I just actually read the first Red Queen book that has nothing to do with this first 6 months, so I'm gonna go briefly over that. But I didn't really think the whole plagiarism thing was a problem. So I'm starting to kind of read Red Queen because I enjoyed Powerless so much, and I give Powerless a higher rating. So I don't know what that says about me, but I also just found out that Lauren Roberts is 21. She's so good. She's so good. So I did read Powerless and I really liked it. Like I said in the beginning, I also read the novella Powerful. I think I started Powerless like a couple days before that novella came out so that I could at least have 2 to read back to back. Meanwhile, neither of them really have anything to do with each other when you really look back at it. And turns out it's now a tandem read recommendation. So all of that to say, I really enjoyed it. Another fantasy that kind of made me think of like Hunger Games mixed with, I don't even know what else, but it was really good. I recommend. Archer's Voice, a book that was hyped up so much to me. And while I was reading it, I thought there's just no way I'm giving this a 5 star. And then the ending really bumped it up a star. Heartbreaking book, a romance book, a wonderful book that really teaches you not to judge a book by its cover or a person by the outside and to really get to know people before that you can make these judgments about them. All I have to say is like, that was so worth the $7. I bought the physical copy of that book. It's always so cheap. So if you see Archer's Works, just go buy it. Just go do yourself a favor and read it. It really was a well done book. I thought for sure it had to be an overhyped book, and it wasn't. Christina Lauren, The Paradise Problem. I read this book I think like the day or the day after it came out. I just happened to snag it up on the library app, and oh my goodness, it made me want to go back to Singapore so bad. And the monthly recap with that book, which I believe was May, I had said I really did not like the main characters to begin with. Just the book kind of hit me off a wrong edge in the beginning. I don't know what it was about it that was like, oh, obviously I changed my mind. And it was like, I got through that book in like a day and a half. I ate it up. It was so good. If you are going to be sitting on a beach this summer, you need to pick up The Paradise Problem. 10 out of 10. Wow, I think that this is the only audiobook that I've listened to this year that got 5 stars, and that is Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights. He narrates this audiobook, and you can just see his personality shine through in all of these things that he's talking about. Green Lights is personally never a book that I would like pick up and want to read, and my mom had recommended me this book, but when I saw it on the library app and the hold was like a month, I was like, okay, I'll put a hold on it, whatever, you know, I'll wait. I listened to it while I was moving into this apartment and moving out of my other one. It's like a 6-hour audiobook. It's not long at all. And I was so entertained. It made me love Matthew McConaughey so much more. It made me want to go watch all my favorite movies that he's in all over again. It just was so entertaining. So I don't know if that's exactly how you'd feel about reading the physical book. I'm sure if I read the book, I might give it 3 stars, but listening to Matthew tell these stories, get vulnerable, everything that he does in the book, but with his own voice, it was so good. And the last book on my list of 5-star reads is Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the duology of Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. Originally, after I finished this book, I gave it 4 stars. It was an amazing read, but it wasn't like, oh, top tier 5 star. And then for like the next 3 or 4 days, I go, oh my gosh, I cannot stop thinking about how good Ruthless Vows was. And it actually has a lower star rating than Divine Rivals, and I thought it was so much better than the first book, and I could not stop thinking about it. And when that happens to me and I can't stop thinking about a book like that, it has to be a 5-star book. Like if I am thinking about it the way that I was thinking about Ruthless Vows, it has to be a 5-star. So I actually went back in my Goodreads and I did update it to 5 stars. Now, maybe here's another recommendation of getting into fantasy, because this is a completed duology. It is just the 2 books. See how you like it. It doesn't have like fairies and just some dragons, but it does have some other mythical creatures, but it mainly focuses on the gods and like magic within inanimate objects. And that's all I will give you for that. Oh, so good. And my latest 5-star read within those 6 months. I'm gonna do rapid fire, not really explaining these, but I'm gonna give you honorable mentions of 4 stars that really could have potentially been 5-star books, or I almost rated 5 stars and then bumped down. Like these are ones that also belong in this video, and I'll just go through them quick. There's 6 of them that I pulled off my 4 stars that I said, I could bump these up if I wanted to. So Check and Mate, Allie Hazelwood, another one I ate up. It's about chess. Just for the Summer, Abby Jimenez. Now that I look back, I'm like, why didn't I give it 5 stars? But I think there were a couple of reasons, but in my head, oh my gosh, incredible read. Funny Story, Emily Henry. Just wasn't exactly there for a 5-star read for me, but still so good. This Summer Will Be Different, Carly Fortune. Looking back, should have been a 5-star. Was so thoroughly entertained. I was in the airport a couple weeks ago recommending 2 older ladies this book. I was like, they were in the romance section looking at a couple books. I was like, if you're gonna pick one, pick this one. Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. This would have been 5 stars if I could just add in like the narrator's voice as a reason that I would give it 5 stars, because it is voiced by Meryl Streep and she does an incredible job. But the book itself I think is a 4-star, but if you listen as an audiobook, it's a 5-star for sure. And then A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. Oh my gosh, so good. Another one that I was like, oh, a couple things about it being rushed at the end and some stuff I think she could have added in there, which would have made it a 5-star for me, but those are the 4-star honorable mentions. And that is my 6-month roundup of the 68 books that I have read in the first 6 months of the year. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like it, let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you have any more recommendations for book videos that you want, do you want book vlogs? Do you want book shopping vlogs? Like, what do you want to see? Because I love to do the book content. Pretty new to this space, don't have a ton of new book videos, but I truly enjoy it so much that it's like a little passion project that I want to do more of and create more for. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. But until the next time I see you, I love you so much. If nobody has told you today, I am so proud of you, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. Bye.